Kakeo katatum skatanawao. Just wanted to greet you all, and down here next to this beautiful river. And this is a river that, I've lived beside for most of my life. And it's just recently, I would say, in the last 20 years that I've really started to learn about this river and how much it has meant to our people over the years. And so now these days I spend as much time as I can beside it. And I really think that this river flows right through my heart. That's the way I see it. And so as much as I can, I bring people down here just so they can experience it and be beside it and start to think about what this river has to do with them and their lives. And I think it has a beautiful name that, I really like to share. And I think it's important for people who live here, who drink this water, to know this name, because it has a lot to do with imagination, I think. So we say kisiskâciwani-sîpiy is one of the words that's part of the name. And that describes somebody who's walking swiftly. And Siwani has to do with water flowing, as we see here. And then the last word is Sîpiy, which is a river. That's how we say river. So kisiskâciwani-sîpiy is the proper name for this river. It's the river that flows at a swift walking pace. And my experience has been is that the more I walk beside this river, the more I learn about kinship in this area. And along with kinship, what I wanted to share is that the longer I spend beside this river, the more I begin to understand this place as a living relative. This place where my roots are quite deep, where I have, ancestry that goes back many generations. So to understand it as a living relative means that we can think beneath the surface of the city, beneath the facade of the city, to see the layers of memory, experience, and story that, are also here, that are available to us, the wisdom that exists in this place here. And so I think, a curiosity that a lot of people have is to understand that this particular part of the river valley where we are here between Kinsman Park and Emily Murphy Park has been a gathering place for thousands of years. And when we say gathering place, what that means to me is that this is a place, a major landmark, a big river in a big river valley. So a major landmark where people knew to gather, to come and trade, to do ceremonies together. And, like I always like to say, do all the things that people all around the world like to do when they come together. And I don't think it was any different here for our ancestors as well. And so this is a gathering place. And so part of the puzzle is to figure out why here. Why would they have chosen this place when they had so many other beautiful places along this river valley to choose from? What was it about this place that made it so attractive? And it's something that, I think we can only really speculate on, but I want to share just some of those ideas. I think, one of the first things to understand is that long before this place was known as Edmonton, which is a district in the north of London, this place was known as Kisiskâciwani-sîpiy. And those hills right where the provincial legislative building is and back towards Jasper Ave, that's Kisiskâciwani-sîpiy. And these days, the way the city looks, it's kind of hard to tell because there's been so much development and things have changed so much. But if you look at old maps, if you look at old photos even, or even paintings, you'll see how prominent these hills were. So those hills are known as Kisiskâciwani. Amisk, that's how we say beaver. And Wachi is a hill or a mountain. And so those are the Beaver Hills that we see right here. And so the way I've learned about this is that is Beaver Hills proper, right there. And when the fort was put up there in 1829, they began to refer to it as Kisiskâciwani-sîpiy, which means Beaver Hills House. That was the particular name for Fort Edmonton when it existed up there on those hills. Now, the connection to the beaver is something also to think about as well. And this area here was prolific with beaver. The stories that I've heard is that they controlled this landscape and were everywhere, all along these hills and throughout this area. And of course, they would travel the river and then branch off into other opportunities throughout the landscape. So kisiskâciwani-sîpiy is in reference to how important beaver were in this ecosystem here, how much they controlled this landscape, and how, prevalent they were. They prospered here in this area. And one thing I wanted to share is that over the years, that what I've learned is that beaver are also connected to tobacco. And we know that, tobacco is our most sacred medicine for indigenous people in this part of the world. Whenever you want to honor something sacred, tobacco comes first. And what I was taught is that those teachings come from beaver. And this is a beaver place here we are. So it's also a tobacco place. And part of what, I've learned is that traditionally, because tobacco has been grown around here for a really long time, traditionally, people used to find places where beaver were busy doing what they do in the spring. And they would clear off an area and they would plant the seeds there. And of course, let it grow and sort of looked after by the beaver over the summer, and then come back in the fall and harvest the leaves. And that was a traditional practice here. And so that connection to beaver and tobacco is something that I think about a lot as somebody who's trying to figure out how to live well here. And so back to this idea of kisiskâciwani here, this place as a gathering place, and why they may have chosen that. This is something that I've puzzled on for many years, and I know I still have a lot to learn, but one thing that we have to think about is that, the people that I'm thinking about were Muscateo and nêhiyawêwin, which are Plains Cree. So these are people who typically traveled on land. They didn't use canoes. And so I'm thinking about people who would have approached this river valley to come to this gathering place, to be part of the trade and the ceremonies and all those things, and how they would have come down into this valley and crossed this river. And that's why I wanted to come to this particular place here, because it's my view is this is where they crossed. So in thinking, practically, because, they traveled with all their stuff, and young and old. So how, would they have come down into this valley safely and comfortably? And all along the south side of the riverbank here where we are, this bank is actually quite steep. And so they wouldn't have come down a bank like this with, the grandparents and so on. It just wouldn't have happened. So they would have been looking for a place where, the bank is fairly gentle and easy to come down. And so I think just west of the high-level bridge, as you come to the U of A campus, right in that area there, the bank becomes fairly gentle, the grade becomes fairly gentle. And so I think over all those thousands of years, as people travel down into this area to cross the river to be part of the gathering place tradition, this is where they would have come down into the valley. Now, when they come down here to the river, of course, they're looking for a place where it's fairly easy to access the river and easy to get out. And this spot meets a lot of those criteria. Just upriver from where we are, you can access the river off the trail and come down fairly safely. And we can see right here, the river is fairly wide, which means in general the water level's down a little lower and it makes it easier to cross. One thing to think about is these days this river is dammed in 2 spots. And one of the goals when you dam a river is to regulate the flow so it's predictable, so we know what to expect. And so this river is kind of unnatural with its level, especially at this time of year where typically it would have been much lower than we're used to seeing it. For this gathering place tradition, when people would have been coming here, mostly would have been in the summer and fall. So this time of year, we're mid-September right now, this would have been the time when gathering here would have been busiest. And so this river would have been much easier to cross than we're used to seeing it now. The other thing is that we know that people watch where buffalo crossed bodies of water like this. And so this is likely a buffalo crossing right here, which is where the people would have crossed. Now, another factor is that there is a shelf underneath the surface of the water right here that invites you to cross there. It's about waist deep out in the middle of the river right here. And it does get a little deeper on the other side, but of course they would have navigated that. But probably the main factor, one of the main factors that they decided to gather here is that over there, the north bank of the river here, is a perfect camping spot. In this prairie landscape where we are, there is not a better camping spot than that over there. It's nice and flat, easy access to the river, lots of wood, and for most of the year, it's much sunnier over there on that side. And there's a lot more berries typically. I've checked it out. So this is that crossing spot right here. And so, some people call this the Beaver Hills Complex. So that means we have the trail down here to the river valley. We have the crossing spot, camping area, the Beaver Hills, and on the other side of the hills, where the new bridge is, the north side of the new bridge, that's where most of the trading and the ceremonies took place over there. And there's also a burial ground and cemetery over there as well. So all of that is the story of what I know of why they chose this place to gather and why, we have such a big city here now. Some of the old people I know, they've said, we're not surprised that people have chosen to live here in such large numbers because this place attracts people to it. It has that ancient kind of connection. Kisiskâciwani-sîpiy. So those are the layers of memory and history experience that I think about when I'm down here beside this beautiful river. Hi, kisiskâciwani-sîpiy.